astrology, telekinesis, feng shui, UFO sightings, germ theory, plate tectonics, and the existence of atoms. What do all these things have in common? They were at one point in time considered pseudoscience. The first four are still considered pseudoscience. Pseudoscience consists of theories that claim to be factual but are actually dismissed as false on the grounds that they have not yet been proven by science. Just because science can't prove a theory yet, does that mean we should assume that these theories are false until we find empirical proof for it? Karl Popper's falsifiability criterion states that for a theory to be scientific, it should be falsifiable, or capable of being tested and potentially proven false. According to Popper, then, the theory that black cats bring bad luck is unfalsifiable because how do you quantify an individual's baseline level of luck to calculate the influence that black cats have on the trajectory of said individual's fate? But just because science can't prove this theory yet, should we assume that this theory can never be proven by science? No, we shouldn't exclude the possibility that theories considered unfalsifiable currently can become falsifiable in the future. For example, continental drift, which is the hypothesis that the Earth's continents broke apart and drifted across the ocean bed, was once considered unfalsifiable before we developed the tools and methods that we can use to empirically prove the theory. The last 3 items of the list I gave at the start of the video were later empirically proven to be true. When you encounter a theory that doesn't sound right that you can't prove yet, simply dismissing it as false or unfalsifiable disincentivizes us from trying to improve upon our scientific method so that we're able to prove whether or not it's true or false. In order to get an answer, you must first ask a question, no matter how silly. Is the Earth flat?
0 post-launch flight operations.
Aww. So, as we know, in many cases pseudoscience was proven wrong by empirical science. Flat Earth theory is one of them, as well as the claim that we use just 10% of our brains. Given that the evidence is correct, it might be reasonable to believe these theories to be false, but we still mustn't exclude the possibility that the scientific effort exerted towards proving the theory has been insufficient. For example, the possibility that the methodology is flawed. But even if our methodology is perfect, does something being scientifically proven to be true mean that it's actually true? Well, what does it mean to scientifically prove something? What is science? Definitely not pseudoscience. Haha. Okay. Pseudoscience by definition fails to meet scientific standards, but we're the ones who made the scientific standards. We say that Greek mythology and astrology is made up, but we forget that science as a discipline is also made up. By who? White men, mostly. Empiricism is the branch of epistemology that believes that knowledge primarily comes from sensory experience such as direct observation. The Eurocentric bias in science creates the cognitive bias of scientism, which elevates empirical science and the scientific method as the sole reliable source of knowledge. This bias perpetuates an elitist and Eurocentric perspective that favors scientific explanations and overlooks subjective or non-quantifiable aspects of knowledge. It dismisses non-European perspectives as primitive or superstitious. If you do think that Western science is just more real than the science of other cultures, remember that each ancient culture individually developed different ways to calculate pi. We're using approximately the same brains to observe the same universe and to use the rules that we found to help us survive. We all did a pretty good job at keeping ourselves alive. Except when we tried to kill each other. When we dismiss theories on the grounds of that doesn't seem likely to happen, we fall prey to a cognitive bias because the validity of the theory is not affected by the believability of that theory. What we believe is likely to happen is rooted in a subjective impression of what science is, rather than what science actually is. And this subjective impression of what constitutes as valid knowledge is shaped by scientism. An example of this cognitive bias is people's beliefs about what happens after death, which is something that none of us have experienced and thus none of us know anything about. Concepts like heaven, hell, or reincarnation are considered silly by some, while the theory of nothingness, everything goes dark, is considered more scientific and more widely believed in. We literally know nothing about what happens after death. When we pick a side or form any sort of opinion on this topic, it can only root from cognitive biases. Dismissing a theory as false or unscientific on the grounds of lacking empirical science isn't helpful because most of science was developed through theoretical frameworks rather than direct observation. Theories in particle physics, for example, such as string theory, may lack empirical evidence currently, but they have value in that they challenge existing paradigms and drive scientific progress. And tickle my brain, which I like. But even when science is completely empirical knowledge still isn't a source of objective truth. It's rare for science to have absolute certainty in the causal links that it draws between observations and theories. When Newton saw an apple fall from a tree, he theorized about the gravitational force, and we just went along with it because his theories are consistent with our observations and it makes sense. He just observed what happened and theorized about why it happened. And most of science is just this. But just because his theories make sense doesn't mean that there aren't other possible explanations for the apple falling. For example, invisible fairies, or maybe apples of free will and prefer to be on the ground. We went along with Newton's theories because as far as we know, it describes our physical world accurately. That is until we developed equipment that was precise enough to allow us to observe what goes down in the quantum scale.
The single electron leaves as a particle becomes a wave of potentials, goes through both slits, and interferes with itself to hit the wall like a particle. It goes through both slits, and it goes through neither. And it goes through just one, and it goes through just the other.
So we discover that the entire field of classical physics fails to accurately describe and predict quantum phenomena. Then we have to come up with new theories like string theory or loop quantum gravity, whatever that is, to try and unify classical physics and quantum physics into a single framework. And this is constantly happening. Every time we learn more about the world, there's a chance that our old theories about the world are proven wrong. But even if we could experience infinity in every aspect of the world that we experience is still local to our subjective reality only. We think of truth as something that is universal and objective. Asking if something is true assumes that there is an objective reality for us to observe. We experience an illusion of the existence of an objective reality because most of us agree upon the things that we see. If everyone on the planet believes that birds are real because we can see them and touch them, does that mean we know that birds are real? No, because belief is not equal to knowledge. There's still the possibility that we have different definitions of what birds are, that we see different versions of birds that we both define as birds, or that we're collectively hallucinating. We'd never know whether or not birds are objectively real, because we don't know whether or not the reality we observe is the objective reality. Popular thought experiments online, like we're all brains in jars, or we're living in a simulation, or my red is different from your red, or that I'm the only one who sees birds and everyone's just lying to me, are all just people questioning whether or not there really is an objective reality to perceive beyond our subjective reality. We question it because we will never know, because we're trapped in our subjective reality, and technically anything that we perceive is still a part of it. So is it possible to know anything? I believe not. And that stance aligns with philosophical skepticism. Most people are selectively skeptical about pseudoscience, like astrology, but the same people are often not skeptical of the claims of knowledge they find on the internet or in their textbooks that's maybe based on a study riddled with p-hacking, and that again is due to the tyranny of scientism. Anyway, philosophical skepticism rejects even knowledge claims that seem like common sense, because it suggests that beliefs can never become knowledge, and we shouldn't believe nor disbelieve any proposition but keep an open mind, because no matter how certain you are about a given belief, it can still be proven wrong, and the only thing we're certain of is the absolute uncertainty of it all. I'm not telling you to go about the rest of your life questioning whether or not you have hands, because even if there might not be a universal truth in the philosophical sense, in the context of our lives where knowledge serves a functional purpose to optimize our happiness, there is such a thing as an objective statistical fact. Empiricism is consistent with the way we interact with the world. We collect data from observing the world and use the data to predict trends to inform our decisions. There's a reason empiricism is the branch of epistemology that they teach in schools, because it serves our interests as a humanity. Because knowledge advises all of our decision-making, it might be in our best interest to label claims that are not supported by sufficient empirical proof as misinformation. However, it's also important to be ready to apply that same skepticism to our current beliefs. All of us are prone to mistaking belief for knowledge and to hastily dismiss theories that don't align with our current belief system. And that's a problem because our belief systems are rooted in cultural norms and biases that perpetuate systemic inequalities. The point of science is to continuously discover new things that challenge our old theories, not to use our old theories that are very potentially faulty to refuse new possibilities. Scientific progress is only made possible with empiricism. Without the sense of certainty that empiricism offers us, we wouldn't get anywhere. Because to want to know more about the world, you must first believe that knowledge exists and is obtainable. Empiricism is not the enemy of, or mutually exclusive with, skepticism. My favorite thing about humans is that we try to find out stuff. We spent decades trying to send humans into space, and although there's a huge incentive to do this in terms of financial and national interests, I'd like to believe that at least some people working on the space projects were doing this just because they wanted to see what it's like out there, and to take a selfie with 4 billion people at once. It's cool to want to know things, even if we're too stupid to know whether or not we can ever know anything at all. And birds aren't real.